The bridge of the US Vindication was cold and quiet, wrapped in the kind of heavy silence that only came before the storm. Overhead, the ship's lighting was dimmed to combat readiness mode, casting everyone in deep shadows and stark lines. Instruments blinked with purpose, humming in the background like the heartbeat of a predator coiled and waiting. Outside the reinforced viewports, stars drifted across the void like silent witnesses. Admiral Marcus Thorne stood at the center of it all, a tall, imposing figure clad in matte black command armor. His expression was unreadable, like stone carved by years of war and loss. The silence was broken, not by his crew, but by a voice slithering from the main holoscreen, cold, artificial, and alien. "You have 3 standard cycles to comply with our terms," the voice intoned with synthetic sharpness. "Surrender, Earth. The Qatar Dominion will not tolerate further delays." On screen, the being delivering the ultimatum stared with an unsettling calm. The ambassador of the Qatar Dominion was a grotesque thing to human eyes, tall and skeletal, with glistening plates of wet-looking armor covering its narrow form. Dozens of eyes blinked in perfect synchrony, unblinking and mechanical in their rhythm, fixed squarely on Thorne. To the uninitiated, the Qatar might have seemed godlike in their menace. To Admiral Thorne, they looked like just another empire that had mistaken humanity's patience for weakness. Thorne remained seated at first, leaning slightly forward, one hand loosely draped over the edge of his command chair. There was a calmness to him, measured and dangerous, like a viper uncoiling. Around him, his crew said nothing. Every soldier on that bridge had been hand-selected, not just for their brilliance or discipline, but for one shared trait. They understood what was coming, and so they waited. The Qatar ambassador's voice oozed on. "Resistance is illogical. You're outnumbered. Your technology is inferior. Your surrender is not just expected, it is inevitable." That was when Thorne finally moved. He leaned back in his chair, slow and deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. Fingers danced across the console at his side, pulling up a 3-dimensional projection of the region of space they were currently orbiting. The galaxy map rotated before him, zooming in on a sector that had gone from peace to the precipice of war. Thousands of red icons dotted the holographic space, each one a Qatar warship. Capital ships, Prasios, Karios, Pretios, but homed a fleet built not for conquest. They had the numbers, they had the firepower. It was enough to crush a world like Earth 10 times over. A lesser man might have flinched. Thorne just smiled, cold, confident, dangerous. "Let me get this straight," he said finally, his voice cutting clean through the silence like a scalpel. "You think we're just going to roll over and hand you the keys to our home? Do you believe that you can park your damn armada outside our atmosphere, issue threats, and we'll just surrender?" The ambassador's multi-eyed stare never wavered. "That is correct." The word hung in the air like a curse. Thorne stood slowly, arms crossed behind his back as he walked toward the main view screen, his eyes locked on the grotesque alien figure. When he stopped just short of the console, he said quietly, "You've been watching us for what, 10 years? Maybe more, and you still don't get it." A flicker passed through the alien's eyes, not fear exactly, but the beginning of doubt. Their confidence had always come from their overwhelming military strength, but there was something in Thorne's demeanor that disturbed that confidence. Something buried beneath the surface, untouched by fear. "We're not like you," Thorne continued, his voice low, slow, deliberate. "You look at our ships, you analyze our weapons, you measure our numbers and call them lacking. You think our tactics are outdated, primitive." He stepped even closer now until his face filled the screen from the ambassador's point of view. His voice dropped another octave, laced with something far more dangerous than anger conviction. "But here's the thing about humans. We don't just fight wars, we become war." The ambassador's expression twitched, subtle but unmistakable. For a species that prided itself on psychological control, even that was telling. Thorne's tone hardened. "We fought enemies stronger than us, bigger, faster, smarter. And we won not because we had better guns, but because when you push humanity to the edge we don't break." He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. "They adapt, we endure. And then we hit back so hard the galaxy writes songs about it." The ambassador hissed a sound intended to intimidate, but it only made Thorne's smile tighten. You wanted to test it, stepping back just far enough to slam his fist against the holographic image of the Qatar fleet. The projection fractured, breaking into fragments like shattered glass. You think we're afraid of war? No, you see, we're the reason war exists in the first place. It's part of us. Lives in our bones. His voice crescendoed, booming across the bridge. We don't fight because we want to win. We fight because we have to. And when the time comes when everything we love is on the line, we don't lose. The alien twitched. His composure, so polished moments ago, now began to erode. This is your final warning, it said, though the edge of authority had dulled. Comply or be destroyed. Don tilted his head slightly, as if honestly considering the offer. Then, with a sudden motion that startled even his veteran crew, he brought his fist down on the console a second time, severing the transmission. The screen went dark. For a moment, the bridge held its breath. Facing his crew, his voice calm and cold as steel, "Prepare the ship." Captain Ryder, standing at Thorne's right side, was already in motion. The veteran of over a dozen campaigns, his face bore the scars of wars fought in gravity wells and asteroid belts. They didn't need to ask twice. "Orders, sir?" he asked, voice sharp and ready. "We're taking the fight to them," Thorne said, stepping back into the command chair. "We've danced long enough. No more defensive posturing. No more political games. This ends now." Ryder's lips curled into a tight grin. "Aye, sir. Fighters prepped. Weapons charged. Crew on alert." As his crew moved with disciplined urgency, Thorne allowed himself one final glance at the darkness beyond the viewport. "They're not just fighting for Earth," he murmured. "We're fighting for everything that makes us human." His hands curled into fists. "And we're going to make damn sure they never forget what it cost them to find that out." The moment the connection to the Qatar ambassador was severed, a stillness settled over the bridge of the US Vindication. Not the kind of silence born from fear or uncertainty, but the sharp, electric kind that comes right before the thunder cracks. Every man and woman aboard knew exactly what had just happened. There was no more diplomacy, no more bluffing. The game was over. War had been declared. Admiral Marcus Thorne didn't waste a second. "All stations," he called out, voice steady, deliberate, commanding. "Combat alert. Initiate full offensive protocol." Flood an intercept course straight into the heart of the Qatar formation. Around him, the bridge erupted into motion, not in panic but in precision. Officers moved quickly to their consoles, fingers dancing across touch screens and control pads. Flight lighting replaced the usual soft white glow overhead, bathing the ship in a low, steady warning hue. Sirens gave one short pulse, signaling the crew to battle readiness. Throughout the ship, Marines rushed to stations, pilots strapped into their cockpits, and engineering teams locked down the reactors for maximum output. Captain Ryder was already at Thorne's side. He didn't ask why they were attacking. He knew better. Instead, he asked the one question that mattered. "What's the target, sir?" Thorne brought up the tackle display. Their entire Qatar fleet filled the screen like a wall of death. Hundreds, no, thousands of red markers packed together so tightly they obscured the stars behind them. It was a fleet built for overwhelming dominance, not subtlety. Qatar didn't believe in surgical strikes. They believed in rolling over their enemies with sheer mass and firepower. "We're not skimming their edge," Thorne said. "We're not waiting for them to fire first. We're going to show them who we are, and that starts with punching them right in the face." Ryder's grin was crooked and fearless. "Aye, Admiral." In the helm pit, Lieutenant Navarro, a thin but sharp-eyed pilot from South Texas, called out hyperdrive charging. Targeting central cluster of the enemy fleet. Estimated transit time 27 seconds from jump to contact. Thorne nodded. "Good. That's where we hit. Dead center. They expect us to run or hold back. We'll break that expectation right out of the gate." Below of white-blue energy, railgun slugs, tungsten and uranium, moving at a fraction below light speed, punched through the void like thunderbolts. Torpedoes screamed from their tubes in precise, staggered salvos, each targeting a specific vessel in the Qatar vanguard. Within seconds, 2 enemy frigates exploded into debris, their shields shredded and hulls ripped apart by kinetic and plasma fire. Shockwaves from the blasts lit the blackness of space like small suns. Nearby, other ships scrambled to react, but the sheer audacity of the attack had bought Vindication a precious window. The bridge of the human vessel, shook violently as return fire began to slam into its shielding. Bright flashes danced across the hull as the energy deflectors absorbed the impact. Shields at 92% came the report from engineering. All systems stable. Thorn barely acknowledged the call. His eyes were locked on the tactical display. The Qatar were waking up now. Ships were turning. Fighters were deploying. The initial chaos was giving way to structure. In moments, the swarm would close around them. Bring us hard to starboard. Delta pattern evasive, Thorn barked. I want us moving no predictable vectors. The ship lurched to the side, inertia dampeners straining to keep the crew upright as Vindication banked hard. Plasma blasts and ion beams streaked past where it had been just moments before. Navarro muttered under his breath. They're pissed now. Let them be, Thorn replied. Let them feel fear. All around them, the Qatar ships moved to trap the human battleship, adjusting their positions and forming a tightening circle. From their perspective, the tactic made sense: encircle, overwhelm, obliterate. It was how they'd won a dozen campaigns across half the known sectors. But Thorn wasn't playing by the rules. They're trying to box us in, Ryder said, eyes tracking the incoming fighters. If they close the ring, we're toast. Thorn pointed at the display. There's equays, a gap in their formation. 2 heavy cruisers left at exposed, probably moving into position. That's where we go. Navarro nodded, already adjusting the ship's heading. Course 320 by 520 by 517, engines roaring to life. State of Vindication wasn't a nimble vessel, not by most standards, but under the right hands and with enough firepower. It didn't need to be elegant. It needed to be relentless. As the ship surged forward, fighters swarmed from all directions. Sleek alien craft peppered the shields with rapid-fire pulses, banking and twisting like hornets, trying to break through a bear's hide. Shields down to 63%, come the call. Thorn didn't blink. Hold the line. Gunnery hit those cruisers. Torpedoes. Now, the torpedo tubes fired again. 4 warheads screamed through space toward our enemy cruisers. The ships tried to adjust, maneuvering laterally to avoid the barrage, but Vindication's targeting systems had already accounted for their evasion path. The result was spectacular. 2 torpedoes struck home, detonating in a fury of light and sound. One cruiser's midsection ruptured entirely, its engines flickering out as it tumbled. End was torn open at the stern, venting atmosphere and fire before careening out of formation. A roar of triumph echoed across the bridge. Cruisers disabled, punch through, Thorn ordered. Engines full burn. Break the circle. The Vindication drove straight through the hole they'd carved. Enemy ships tried to close in behind them, but they were too slow. The human ship had already cleared the trap. For a brief moment there was daylight. They were through. And yet no one on the bridge relaxed. No one cheered. No one cheered, because they all knew this was just the beginning. They'd taken the first shot. Drawn blood, declared themselves. Now the war would come in full. Thorn stood tall at the center of it all, eyes cold, heart steady. He hadn't just brought the Vindication into battle. He'd thrown down a challenge to the galaxy itself. The moment the Vindication broke through the gap in the Qatar fleet's formation, everything changed. For a few heartbeats, the void ahead of them seemed wide open, uncluttered space, stretching toward the far side of the battle grid. But Thorn knew better than to celebrate. That moment of clarity was an illusion, just a pocket between hell and deeper hell, that yet they were adjusting, reacting, already beginning to shift forces to compensate for the human ship's sudden breach. And the real danger wasn't behind them, it was still ahead. Captain Ryder was already reading the tactical screen, his brow furrowed. They're regrouping fast, Admiral. The cruisers we hit are drifting, but the second line's closing in. Looks like destroyers flanking units. They're trying to catch us before we reach open space. Thorn nodded, stepping forward. They can't let them close the net. Keep the pressure on. Helm, accelerate full combat speed. No detours. Aye, sir, Navarro answered immediately, his hands flying across the helm controls. The Vindication surged forward once more, its massive engines roaring to life with a thrust that could bend steel. Inertia dampeners groaned against the sudden burst of velocity, but they held steady. Every bolt in the ship groaned, but it pushed harder. Inside the bridge, the vibrations were constant now. Steady shakes and tremors rolled through the deck as energy discharges impacted the shielding system. Sparks occasionally spat from overloaded systems, and warning indicators blinked with unsettling frequency. Still, the crew moved with practiced, calm, focused, hardened, battle-ready. On screen, the second wave of Qatar vessels appeared. They weren't as tightly clustered as the forward line, but they were fast, nimble destroyers and escort craft, weaving into position like fangs closing around a throat. They're forming a second blockade, the rider warned. Two destroyers dead ahead, moving to intercept. Horn's eyes narrowed. Good. Let's give them a reason to regret it. Gunnery Officer Chen was already running targeting solutions. Forward torpedo tubes locked. Auto-cycling primary intercept points. They can give you a 15-second staggered barrage. Make it count, Thorne replied. The bridge trembled again, more violently this time. Plasma rounds from the Qatar flankers slammed into their deflector shields in rapid volleys, causing brilliant flashes of light outside the viewport. Shields at 59%, Lieutenant Harris called from their engineering console. Derouting secondary power from life support non-critical zones only, Thorne gave a firm nod. Proved, prioritize forward shielding. They're going straight through. Navarro adjusted course ever so slightly, angling the ship to slice through the two destroyers forming the new blockade. It wasn't just reckless, it was suicidal on paper, but that's what the Vindication was built for. It wasn't a defensive cruiser or a tactical interceptor. It was a juggernaut, massive, dangerous and deadly in the hands of a commander who knew how to wield it. Torpedoes ready, Chen announced. Marking targets, Thorne didn't blink. Fire. From the ship's undercarriage, a staggered series of torpedoes launched into the void. Each one locked onto a separate Qatar destroyer, cutting through space with precision guidance and advanced evasion countering tech. The alien ships reacted instantly, trying to deploy countermeasures, but they were a step too slow. The torpedoes struck one of the destroyer's dead center. The impact ripped through the forward hull, punching into its reactor deck. The engineering core began its deep thrum, resonating through the ship like a massive war drum. The hyperdrive was spinning up, drawing on every ounce of power the Vindication had. Outside the reinforced hull, space shimmered as the ship prepared to tear through it like a blade through silk. Canary stations, Vaughn said, turning toward the weapons officers. I want every turret locked and loaded, arm the plasma cannons, ready the railguns, and prep the torpedo tubes for staggered release. Lieutenant Chen, gunnery chief and veteran of the Martian perimeter campaigns, snapped to it. Aye, sir. All systems coming online. The ship's massive armament system began to activate, guns rotating, targeting systems warming up, barrels glowing faintly with the heat of re-ignition. Across its hull, the Vindication bristled with death. This wasn't just a ship, it was a weapon. Sir, Navarro called again, voice taut with adrenaline. Hyperdrive jump is ready. Zone gave a single nod. Execute. The stars outside the viewport elongated, stretching into lines of white as the ship leapt into faster-than-light travel. Hum built to a roar, and then silence. For 27 seconds, time bent, and then they arrived. The Vindication ripped out of hyperspace like a thunderclap, dropping directly into the center of the Qatar fleet's forward formation. Met them was a nightmare of scale, an endless array of warships looming in every direction, arranged in tight patterns and ready to crush anything foolish enough to enter their range. The enemy had expected to fight on their terms. They'd assumed humanity would defend, fall back, scatter. They never expected the first move to come from a single human battleship, launching itself right into their teeth. Thorne's voice was calm as stone. All batteries fire at will. With a sound like the sky itself was cracking open, the Vindication unleashed hell. Plasma bolts shot from the side turrets in blinding arcs of white-blue energy. Railgun slugs, tungsten and uranium, moving at a fraction below light speed, punched through the void like thunderbolts. Torpedoes screamed from their tubes in precise, staggered salvos, each targeting a specific vessel in the Qatar vanguard. Within seconds, two enemy frigates exploded into debris, their shields shredded and hulls ripped apart by kinetic and plasma fire. Shockwaves from the blasts lit the blackness of space like small suns. Nearby, other ships scrambled to react, but the sheer audacity of the attack had bought Vindication a precious window. The bridge of the human vessel shook violently as return fire began to slam into its shielding. Bright flashes danced across the hull as the energy deflectors absorbed the impact. Shields at 92% came the report from engineering. All systems stable. Thorn barely acknowledged the call. His eyes were locked on the tactical display. The Qatar were waking up now. Ships were turning. Fighters were deploying. The initial chaos was giving way to structure. In moments, the swarm would close around them. Bring us hard to starboard. Delta pattern evasive, Thorn barked. I want us moving no predictable vectors. The ship lurched to the side, inertia dampeners straining to keep the crew upright as Vindication banked hard. Plasma blasts and ion beams streaked past where it had been just moments before. Navarro muttered under his breath. They're pissed now. Let them be, Thorn replied. Let them feel fear. All around them, the Qatar ships moved to trap the human battleship, adjusting their positions and forming a tightening circle. From their perspective, the tactic made sense: encircle, overwhelm, obliterate. It was how they'd won a dozen campaigns across half the known sectors. But Thorn wasn't playing by the rules. They're trying to box us in, Ryder said, eyes tracking the incoming fighters. If they close the ring, we're toast. Thorn pointed at the display. There's Equays, a gap in their formation. 2 heavy cruisers left at exposed, probably moving into position. That's where we go. Navarro nodded, already adjusting the ship's heading. Course 320 by 520 by 517, engines roaring to life. State of Vindication wasn't a nimble vessel, not by most standards, but under the right hands and with enough firepower. It didn't need to be elegant. It needed to be relentless. As the ship surged forward, fighters swarmed from all directions. Sleek alien craft peppered the shields with rapid-fire pulses, banking and twisting like hornets, trying to break through a bear's hide. Shields down to 63%, come the call. Thorn didn't blink. Hold the line. Gunnery hit those cruisers. Torpedoes. Now, the torpedo tubes fired again. 4 warheads screamed through space toward our enemy cruisers. The ships tried to adjust, maneuvering laterally to avoid the barrage, but Vindication's targeting systems had already accounted for their evasion path. The result was spectacular. 2 torpedoes struck home, detonating in a fury of light and sound. One cruiser's midsection ruptured entirely, its engines flickering out as it tumbled. End was torn open at the stern, venting atmosphere and fire before careening out of formation. A roar of triumph echoed across the bridge. Cruisers disabled, punch through, Thorn ordered. Engines full burn. Break the circle. The Vindication drove straight through the hole they'd carved. Enemy ships tried to close in behind them, but they were too slow. The human ship had already cleared the trap. For a brief moment there was daylight. They were through. And yet no one on the bridge relaxed. No one cheered. No one cheered, because they all knew this was just the beginning. They'd taken the first shot. Drawn blood, declared themselves. Now the war would come in full. Thorn stood tall at the center of it all, eyes cold, heart steady. He hadn't just brought the Vindication into battle. He'd thrown down a challenge to the galaxy itself. The moment the Vindication broke through the gap in the Qatar fleet's formation, everything changed. For a few heartbeats, the void ahead of them seemed wide open, uncluttered space, stretching toward the far side of the battle grid. But Thor knew better than to celebrate. That moment of clarity was an illusion, just a pocket between hell and deeper hell, that yet they were adjusting, reacting, already beginning to shift forces to compensate for the human ship's sudden breach. And the real danger wasn't behind them, it was still ahead. Captain Ryder was already reading the tactical screen, his brow furrowed. They're regrouping fast, Admiral. The cruisers we hit are drifting, but the second line's closing in. Looks like destroyers flanking units. They're trying to catch us before we reach open space. Thorn nodded, stepping forward. They can't let them close the net. Keep the pressure on. Helm, accelerate full combat speed. No detours. Aye, sir, Navarro answered immediately, his hands flying across the helm controls. The Vindication surged forward once more, its massive engines roaring to life with a thrust that could bend steel. Inertia dampeners groaned against the sudden burst of velocity, but they held steady. Every bolt in the ship groaned, but it pushed harder. Inside the bridge, the vibrations were constant now. Steady shakes and tremors rolled through the deck as energy discharges impacted the shielding system. Sparks occasionally spat from overloaded systems, and warning indicators blinked with unsettling frequency. Still, the crew moved with practiced, calm, focused, hardened, battle-ready. On screen, the second wave of Qatar vessels appeared. They weren't as tightly clustered as the forward line, but they were fast, nimble destroyers and escort craft, weaving into position like fangs closing around a throat. They're forming a second blockade, the rider warned. Two destroyers dead ahead, moving to intercept. Horn's eyes narrowed. Good. Let's give them a reason to regret it. Gunnery Officer Chen was already running targeting solutions, forward torpedo tubes locked. Auto-cycling primary intercept points. They can give you a 15-second staggered barrage. Make it count, Thorne replied. The bridge trembled again, more violently this time. Plasma rounds from the Qatar flankers slammed into their deflector shields in rapid volleys, causing brilliant flashes of light outside the viewport. Shields at 59%, Lieutenant Harris called from their engineering console. Derouting secondary power from life support non-critical zones only, Thorne gave a firm nod. Proved, prioritize forward shielding. They're going straight through. Navarro adjusted course ever so slightly, angling the ship to slice through the two destroyers forming the new blockade. It wasn't just reckless, it was suicidal on paper, but that's what the Vindication was built for. It wasn't a defensive cruiser or a tactical interceptor. It was a juggernaut, massive, dangerous and deadly in the hands of a commander who knew how to wield it. Torpedoes ready, Chen announced. Marking targets, Thorne didn't blink. Fire. From the ship's undercarriage, a staggered series of torpedoes launched into the void. Each one locked onto a separate Qatar destroyer, cutting through space with precision guidance and advanced evasion countering tech. The alien ships reacted instantly, trying to deploy countermeasures, but they were a step too slow. The torpedoes struck one of the destroyer's dead center. The impact ripped through the forward hull, punching into its reactor thing and triggering a chain reaction. The vessel exploded in a fury of white-blue light, fragments scattering across the path of the second destroyer like shrapnel. That ship tried to turn and avoid the blast radius, but ended up flying directly into a hail of kinetic rounds from the Vindication's side-mounted railguns. Slugs tore through its hull like a buzzsaw, venting atmosphere and igniting internal fires. Both destroyers down, Ryder called. Opening in the line confirmed. Push through, Thorne ordered. Boys steady. Before they can close it again. The Vindication shot ahead, slipping through the gap left by the crippled vessels. The tactical display lit up with shifting red markers as the rest of the Qatar formation scrambled to adjust. Enemy fighters buzzed around them like hornets, their energy blasts rattling the outer hull with rhythmic fury. They've got two fighter wings closing on our 6, Harris warned. Starboard armors taking consistent hits. Thorne responded without hesitation. Deploy aft countermeasures. Launch the rear cannon drone array. Intermittent bursts, randomized intervals. Ryder raised an eyebrow. Blind them, even if only for 10 seconds. The drone ports opened with a mechanical clunk, releasing several spinning micro-units into the void. Each drone immediately began broadcasting random energy pulses, mimicking ship signatures and shifting aim fields to confuse enemy targeting systems. Simultaneously, small defensive turrets emerged from the Vindication's rear flank and began spitting high-velocity shells at the closing fighters. The result was immediate. The formation of Qatar fighters wobbled, their cohesion breaking. Several ships peeled away, colliding with one another or drifting too wide. 3 were destroyed outright, caught in their own allies' fire as their wounds continued to jam their systems. Rear pursuit disrupted, Navarro confirmed. For now, don't slow down, Thorne said. Keep moving. We get caught in this pocket and it's over. The Vindication barreled forward, weaving between clusters of enemy ships and debris fields. Every inch of space was contested now. They weren't just charging a line, they were carving a path through a minefield of plasma fire and quantum destabilizers. Sudden lurch hit the ship hard, throwing several crew members into their harnesses. Direct hit, Harris shouted. Deck 9 hull breach, secondary hangar bay. Thorne's hand shot up. Fate of containment field active. Engaged. No casualties. Fire suppression holding. Thorne let out a slow breath. Good. Can't afford to bleed now. Ahead, the third and final wave of the Qatar defensive perimeter was forming. It wasn't destroyers or frigates. It was heavy cruisers and battle carriers. Each one bristled with weapon systems and armor plating thick enough to shrug off standard bombardments. They're not pulling any punches anymore, Ryder muttered. They're scared, Thorn corrected. We're not following their script. We've survived longer than they expected. It means they're improvising, and when your enemy improvises, they make mistakes. He stared at the center of the screen, two massive cruisers flanking a wide corridor in the formation. There's our opening. That corridor between the carriers, it's tight, but it's not covered. It's a kill box, but not yet active. Navarro looked up. You want to go through that? Thorn nodded. Exactly. Chen blinked. Sir, if they close that gap, then we punch through before we get the chance. This is what we do. One hard run, we get through. We leave them scrambling behind us. Navarro grinned. Kill the boss. The Vindication shifted course one more time. Systems all over the ship began rerouting energy, propulsion, and shields. Non-essential functions dimmed or shut off completely. The bridge lighting flickered momentarily as power surged through the main conduits. Thorn stood tall, hands behind his back, eyes locked on the screen. Final push, he said quietly. Let's remind them who they're dealing with. As the ship charged forward, the two Qatar battle carriers began shifting their positions, realizing too late what the humans were attempting. Their weapon systems began to come online, but the Vindication was already too close. Tannery, Thorn said, voice sharp. Pre-target their primary shield generators. Fire torpedoes on my mark. Full spread. Locked in, Chen confirmed. Fella. A second wave of torpedoes launched, this time aimed directly at the weak points in the carrier's overlapping shield bubbles. The blasts landed simultaneously, shaking the Qatar ships violently and temporarily destabilizing their shields. The Vindication darted through the center corridor like a bullet through glass. Defensive fire reeked their flanks, but the armor held. The starboard hull was scorched, plating ripped and pockmarked, but the ship stayed intact. They'd broken the final perimeter. Behind them, the Qatar fleet reeled. Their formation was fractured, their defensive lines in shambles. The Vindication hadn't just survived it, had torn a gaping hole straight through the heart of the most fortified section of the alien armada. On the bridge, the crew stared at the screen. Ryder turned to Thorn, voice low with awe. We made it. They're through. Thorn didn't smile. Not yet. His eyes scanned the readouts, tracking the chaos they'd left behind. No time to celebrate. They've got a chance now, an opening they never saw coming. Paused, then added, voice cold as iron. Now we finish this. Silence filled the bridge, not the kind but one of relief, but the kind that comes just before you take the shot, you know might change the course of history. The Vindication had done the impossible. It had survived the forward crush of the Qatar Armada. Against every expectation, it had blasted a hole through wave after wave of ships, its hull scorched, shields battered, and crew tested to their breaking point. And yet the ship endured. But Admiral Marcus Thorn wasn't done. They stood at the center of the bridge, the holographic display before him, rotating slowly, casting blue light across his hardened face. The battlefield flickered in layers, burning ships, collapsing lines, their outlines of regrouping formations. But Thorn wasn't looking at the chaos behind them. He was zeroed in on one thing, the command ship. There, nestled deep within the second echelon of the Qatar formation, was a vessel unlike the others, monolithic, angular, Leviathan among monsters. It gloomed in the display like the heart of a beast, surrounded by a constellation of escort ships, defense grids, and overlapping fields of protection. It was the brain of their operation, the nerve center, the thing that made the rest of the fleet coherent. Take it out and the rest would falter. This, Thorn said quietly, tapping the ship's icon on the display, is our new objective. Around him, his officers glanced at one another. Captain Ryder stepped forward, eyebrows raised. Sir, are you suggesting a direct strike on the command vessel? I'm not suggesting it, Thorn replied. I'm ordering it. Ryder exhaled, caught somewhere between shock and understanding. A decapitation strike. Thorn nodded. They're centralized, overconfident, they're not built for chaos. Take out their leadership, cut the head off the snake and the rest of the body, rights without purpose. Lieutenant Navarro turned slightly in his seat. Ship is behind at least 3 protective shells, shield units, artillery walls, and fighter screens. There's no clean shot. There never is, Thorn said. But we just created a window. They're still trying to seal the breach we made. You're acting disorganized. If we're fast, if we hit hard and precise, we can reach the command vessel before they know what we're doing. Gunnery Chief Chen spoke up from the weapons station. Don't need to throw everything we've got at it. There's no soft kill here. That ship will take a full barrage and then some. I know, Thorn said. That's why we're going to hit it with the Nova Cannon. For a split second, the bridge went completely still. The Nova Cannon. It was the Vindication's last resort. A weapon so powerful that even the most fortified armor had no hope of withstanding it. It didn't just punch holes, it obliterated whatever it touched, but it came with risk, enormous power drain, exposure to counterattack. Firing at close range was a gamble. But it was the only way to guarantee success. You're serious? Ryder asked. Dead serious. He turned back to the screen. Plot a course. Direct route way. We move now. Navarro nodded and set the ship on a new vector, angling toward the enemy flagship's position. Course plotted. Eta to primary strike range, 90 seconds. Thorn stepped forward and hit the general comms channel. All hands, this is the Admiral. We are executing a direct strike on the Qatar command vessel. We're prepared for extreme combat conditions. Brace for heavy fire. This is what we were built for. Around the ship, the message went out like a drumbeat. Marines checked their gear. Engineers reinforced the power relays. Pilots ran last-minute diagnostics. Everyone aboard the Vindication knew what it meant to go straight for the throat of an enemy fleet. It meant survival wasn't guaranteed, but neither was surrender. The massive human battleship angled downward slightly as it cut through the black, adjusting for trajectory as the enemy command ship grew larger in the forward viewport. Qatar ships immediately began to react. Tactical markers shifted as destroyers and frigates moved to intercept. A wall of vessels was repositioning thick, overlapping lines of defense. Out. Let them, Thorn said, his voice quiet but sharp. We've already broken their lines once. Can't do it again. Chen's fingers worked quickly over his console. Nova Cannon charging, redirecting power from primary arrays. Time to full capacity, 50 seconds. Enemy ships are adjusting faster this time, Navarro warned. We've got 2 cruisers moving to intercept our flanks and 6 fighter wings closing in from the rear. Rear batteries screen those fighters, Thorn ordered. Forward gunners, focus on carving a path. The Vindication began to shudder as it took heavier fire. The ship's reinforced shielding flared white as high-intensity plasma slammed into the hull. Sparks exploded from overhead conduits. A panel on the port side of the bridge burst, showering a crewman in light debris. Shields at 40%, Harris shouted. We can't take this forever. We don't need forever, Thorn said through gritted teeth. We just need 30 seconds. Ryder was gripping the edge of his console. Sir, the gap's closing. We won't have a line of sight for much longer. Thorn turned the viewport. The enemy command ship loomed ahead like a dark mountain. Its hull shimmered with defense fields, and it was already beginning to reposition banking slightly to pull behind a wall of escort ships. Thorn took a single step forward. Navarro, bring us within 1 kilometer. The young helmsman blinked. Kilometer, sir. You heard me. That cannon hits hardest at close range. We're not wasting the shot. Navarro didn't argue. The ship dropped lower and curved inward toward the command ship, dodging incoming fire with tight adjustments. It was a dangerous dance. One mistake would end them. Nova Cannon at 95%, Chen called. Almost there. On the screen, the Qatar command ship began rotating its ventral turrets toward them. The alien flagship had realized what the Vindication was trying to do, and it was afraid. A first volley of enemy torpedoes plunged thick, glowing trails streaking toward the human vessel like hunting spears. Brace for impact, Ryder shouted. The torpedoes hit like hammers. Ship buckled, plates grinding, warning klaxons blaring in every section of the hull. Power surge flashed across the lighting systems, temporarily darkening the bridge before backup power restored the glow. Shields down to 19%, Harris reported. Hull damage on decks 5 through 9. Keep us steady, Thorn barked. Chen, cannon at full capacity. We're in range. Thorn stepped toward the center of the bridge, every eye locked on him. Fire. The lights aboard the Vindication dimmed instantly as the entire power grid redirected toward a single system. The Nova Cannon, buried deep in the ship's central spinal mount, came alive. Energy pulsed outward, visible in glowing coils that ran along the weapon's outer casing. For a moment even the stars seemed to freeze. Then came the beam. It wasn't just a shot. It was a spear of pure white-blue death, wide as a house and hot enough to melt asteroids. It erupted from the ship and struck the Kata command vessel dead on, bypassing its weakened shields and piercing straight into its core. The result was cataclysmic. The command ship shuddered, then exploded in a cascade of violet and green flame. Its power core went critical, and the shockwave rippled outward in all directions, consuming nearby ships and knocking others into disarray. On the bridge, the tactical screen lit up with system alerts, enemy signals vanishing from the display as the detonation blanketed the sector. A heavy silence followed. Ryder was the first to speak. "It's gone, so command ship's gone." Thorne exhaled slowly, then nodded once. "Good." Chen's voice carried a touch of awe. "That was one hell of a shot. I needed it to be," Thorne replied. "Now let's clean up the rest." Behind them, the fleet had collapsed into chaos. With the command ship destroyed, the Katau forces had no orders, no centralized control. Their formations crumbled. Fighters broke off. Larger ships began retreating on randomized paths. Harris confirmed it seconds later. "Enemy fleet is scattering. Multiple ships going dark or turning tail. They're in complete disarray. Them run. But we take out every ship that doesn't surrender. I started this war thinking we were weak. Let's make sure they remember how wrong they were. Not the stunned silence of fear, nor the wary hush before a firefight. This was something else. This was the breathless pause after a thunderclap. The stillness that falls over a battlefield the instant after the tide turns. Katakura command ship, the towering beast that orchestrated an entire armada, was gone, obliterated. An expanding cloud of fire, twisted metal, and vanishing life signals now occupied the space where once stood the most powerful ship in the enemy fleet. Its destruction hadn't just been a blow, it had been a decapitation, and everyone on that bridge knew it. Admiral Marcus Thorne didn't smile. He didn't allow himself that indulgence, not yet. His hands gripped at edges of the tactical display console as if grounding himself, watching as the flood of red enemy markers began to flicker, stagger, and scatter across the screen. "They're breaking apart," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice hushed but clear. "No coordination, no central com traffic. It's like they don't know what to do." Ryder stepped closer, reading the pattern shift for himself. That was their spine, their brain. It's like cutting the power lines to an entire nervous system. The rest of the body still twitching, but there's no mind behind it. Thorne's voice cut through the air, low and direct. "They counted on centralized control. It's a weakness they never considered." He turned toward the center of the bridge, eyes steady as steel. "Now we exploit it. All hands," he said, keying into the ship-wide cone. "The enemy fleet has lost command cohesion. This is our opportunity. Pursue and neutralize all remaining vessels, no survivors. We're not just winning, we're ending this." Throughout the Vindication, his words echoed like cannon fire. The message was clear. No retreat, no hesitation, and no mercy. The crew didn't flinch. They'd lost friends, taken hits, faced odds that would made lesser men surrender. Now they were going to finish it, Navarro, Thorne said, already back at his post. "Bring us around 30-degree arc sweep. Match velocity with the largest concentration of retreating ships. I want overlapping weapons arcs and full tactical range." "Course locked in," the helmsman responded. "They'd be right on top of them in 30 seconds. The ship turned sharply, engines flaring as it adjusted to hunt. On the tactical display, clusters of Qatar vessels, frigates, destroyers, even a few heavy cruisers were turning erratically, scattering like a flock of birds suddenly deprived of its shepherd. Some tried to form ranks, others turned tail and ran, but most simply floated in stunned disarray, unable to comprehend what had just happened. "They're wide open," Chen said from the weapons station. "I've got 3 targets with overlapping firing solutions. I can chain hits through their holes if we stagger the railgun fire just right." Thorne nodded once. "Do it." A new barrage erupted from the Vindication. Railguns fired in succession, the tungsten slugs traveling so fast they left faint trails of ionized gas in their wake. Each round struck with surgical precision, one after another, piercing through the hulls of 3 Qatar ships in perfect sequence. They tore open like paper, venting atmosphere and flame into the void. 2 ships crumpled and began to spin, engines flickering out. Third tried to retreat, but was finished off by a secondary blast from the aft turrets. Targets neutralized, Jen confirmed. Fake the rhythm tight, Tom said. No gaps, keep them on the back foot. At the engineering console, Harris called out, status updates. Shields stable at 22%. Forward armor holding. We've rerouted cooling from Deck 11 to support sustained firing. If we push hard, we can keep this up another 10 minutes before any serious damage builds up. That's all we need, Thorne said. We finish this in 5. Ryder gave a tight nod, then pointed toward a cluster of larger ships on the edge of the grid. Those are the logistics vessels, carriers, supply chains. They're not built for defense and they're trying to escape through the asteroid belt. Not today, Thorne muttered. Target them. Take out the supply lines first. Targeting locked, Chen said. Firing solution ready. The forward torpedo tubes released another volley, streaking across space toward the slow-moving supply ships. The enemy craft began to veer off, trying to weave between drifting debris fields, but they were too slow. Torpedoes white stoke in perfect sync, detonating against the undersides of the carriers. Their reinforced storage decks ruptured from within, munitions igniting in sympathetic detonations. They exploded entirely, a fireball expanding in all directions. Another listed hard to the right, its engine trailing coolant and plasma in a long dying stream. Confirmed kills, Ryder said. We've crippled their ability to resupply. The rest of the Qatar fleet was in freefall now. Their command vessel, without logistics and with growing casualties, panic spread like wildfire through their lines. Coordination gave way to chaos. Defensive screens evaporated. Weapons fire became sporadic and undisciplined, and Thorne wasn't about to slow down. Them to turn the screws, he said. Prepare for flanking sweep, cut off the retreat vector and hit them from behind. Navarro worked the control zones with sharp, precise movements, adjusting course, bringing us around on an intercept vector. He'll cut through the side of their formation and push them toward the debris field. The Vindication angled sharply again, slicing through the battlefield like a knife. Fated, fighter wings launched sleek, black shapes maneuvering in tight formation, picking off enemy interceptors with pinpoint accuracy. Dogfights erupted across the stars as human and Qatar pilots clashed, but the tide had turned unmistakably. Multiple enemy vessels are initiating jump procedures, Harris reported. They're trying to retreat. Thorne's eyes narrowed, lock down their escape routes, jam the signals. I want them dead, not gone. Engaging gravity well disruptors, Chen said. We've locked down the sector. No one's jumping out without tearing themselves apart. Another barrage erupted from the Vindication's main batteries, slamming into the stern of a retreating cruiser. The ship buckled, twisted and erupted in flame. Escape pods burst from its side, but Thorne didn't flinch. No quarter, he said firmly. They gave none. They pretend a favor. From his post, Ryder gave a quiet nod. He understood. Everyone aboard did. The Qatar Dominion had come to Earth's doorstep with promises of fire and extinction. They demanded submission, offered no path but servitude or annihilation. Their Navarro called out, we're detecting a small fleet segment, trying to break away toward the dark side of the moonlit field. 6 vessels. They've split off from the main group and are trying to regroup. Give chase, Thorne said. Them down to the last ship. As the Vindication surged forward again, the stars twisted in its path. The remaining Qatar ships, sensing the full weight of their collapse, began to scatter in desperation. Some collided with each other, others broke formation and spiraled away. One even opened fire on its own allies in a frenzy of confused, targeting data. They're eating themselves, Ryder observed grimly. Thorne's voice was hard. It's what happens when fear takes over. For the next 7 minutes, the Vindication carved a path of destruction. With every passing second, the tactical display showed fewer and fewer red markers. Each kill was swift, calculated, and merciless. Fighters were picked off, cruisers detonated under coordinated torpedo strikes. Even the smallest Qatar vessels' maintenance skiffs, drone platforms, communication relays were hunted down and vaporized. No trace of the fleet that had once threatened Earth remained untouched. At last, as the dust settled, the final blip on the tactical screen blinked and vanished. A hush fell over the bridge. Then a single word, spoken by Harris. All targets eliminated. Thorne stood silent, hands clasped behind his back. He looked at the screen, now almost entirely blank. save for the drifting wreckage of what had once been the Qatar Dominion's spearhead fleet. The threat was over. The armada that had come to crush Earth was nothing more than debris, fire, and broken hulls spinning in the blackness. Tears erupted across the bridge. Officers shouted, clapped one another on the backs. A few slumped in their seats in exhaustion, faces wet with sweat, eyes shining with disbelief. For the first time since this hell had begun, there was a feeling that humanity might actually have a chance. Ryder turned to Thorne, his expression split between awe and exhaustion. "We did it, sir. They took on the whole damn fleet and we won." Thorne didn't respond right away. He stepped slowly toward the viewport, staring out into the vastness beyond. What he saw wasn't just victory, it was the cost. He saw the scars on his ship, the damage reports still rolling in, the pilots who wouldn't be coming back, the lives spent to deliver this blow. But he also saw the future in which humanity was no longer underestimated, a future in which no species in the galaxy would ever look at Earth and see weakness. He let the silence linger for a moment longer. Then he turned to his crew. "Well done," he said simply. "You've made history today. The aftermath of war is never silent. Even in the vacuum of space where some cannot travel, its echoes are felt in the drifting wreckage of ruined ships, in the shuddering hulls of damaged vessels, in the long, stunned breaths of survivors who suddenly realize they're still alive." From the bridge of the US Vindication, Admiral Marcus Thorne stood at the viewport, watching it all drift past like ghosts. The battlefield was quiet now. The Qatar Armada, once thought invincible, had been reduced to wreckage. Flame-cased hulls turned slowly in zero gravity, some split open like cracked eggshells, others simply frozen in the silence of death. Escape pods, blackened debris, shredded armor plating, all of it marked the trail of destruction left behind by humanity's resistance. There were no more enemy signals, no more incoming threats. The galaxy had gone still. The tactical map was nearly empty now. Red enemy markers had been wiped clean from the grid. The last Qatar ship had gone dark 20 minutes earlier, brought down by a coordinated torpedo strike. The chase had ended. The threat was extinguished, but Thorne didn't feel victorious. Not yet. Captain Ryder approached quietly. His uniform was stained with smoke and sweat, his movements stiff from the strain of a 20-hour battle. But his voice was steady. "Admiral, cleanup crews are retrieving our escape pods and salvage teams are securing the wreckage. Engineering says we'll be spaceworthy again in 72 hours, barring any surprises." Thorne nodded but didn't speak. His eyes remained locked on the stars. Ryder hesitated, then added, "Fleet Command has been monitoring us remotely. Word's already spreading across the relay networks. The outer colonies know, Earth knows. Everyone's hearing what we did out here." Still, Thorne was quiet. "They're calling it the miracle at Erebus Point," Ryder continued, offering a faint smile. "One ship, one crew, a whole fleet shattered. I'd say that qualifies." Thorne finally turned to face him. His eyes weren't cold, they were tired, heavy. "Miracles don't come cheap," he said. Ryder's smile faded. "No sir, they don't. The cost had been steep. The Vindication had lost 17 crew members, dozens more were injured, fighters hadn't returned. Entire sections of the ship were wrecked and sealed off. Repairs would take weeks, maybe longer. And those were just the physical wounds. What lingered now was something deeper, a kind of silence that only came after unleashing everything a people had to offer. Moment when you realize your worst fear never came true, but the Wraithot merely broke you anyway. But there was something else in that silence too. Resolve, pride, proof. Humanity had stood at the edge of annihilation, had stared down a force designed to erase it from existence, and it had not only survived, it had fought back with such fury that the enemy's own legend collapsed under its weight. He had given war, and they had won it. By the time the Vindication turned toward home, the story was already spreading across the stars. Resumed the battle, captured from drone feeds and helmet cams, went viral across allied networks. Citizens from Earth to the outer colonies watched in disbelief as a single Earthship tore through a superior alien force. The reports described the fight in reverent tones, some compared it to ancient epics, others called it a turning point in galactic history. News anchors used words like unprecedented, heroic, and decisive, but beneath the celebration there was something else. Fear. Not of humanity, but of what humanity had shown itself capable of. But they had never seen this sight, not truly. They had never witnessed what humans became when backed into a corner, when their survival was on the line, and their backs were to the wall. That day they did, and they would never forget it. 3 days later, the Vindication arrived at the edge of Earth's defense grid. Damage was still visible across its hull. The scars of battle hadn't been repaired, and they wouldn't be not yet. Thorn had ordered them left untouched, a testament to what had been endured. As they entered orbit, the command channels lit up with transmission after transmission, military codes, diplomatic relays, broadcast requests. The whole planet wanted to speak to the ship that had done them possible. Thorn answered none of them, at least, not until the message came directly from the Unified Council of Earth. The screen flickered to life in front of him, revealing the faces of the world's most powerful leaders. Men and women who controlled fleets, economies, governments. They all looked shaken. Admiral Thorn, the Council's Prime Director, began, on behalf of a grateful Earth and all of humanity's allies across the colonies, let me say thank you. What you and your crew have done is beyond commendation. Thorn gave a nod. We did what we had to do. Yes, the Prime Director replied, voice softer now, and the entire galaxy soared. They've already received overtures from at least 3 neutral species requesting new diplomatic ties. Because those who watched us with caution before are suddenly very interested in maintaining peace. A pause. Transmissions. No retaliation. No demands. We believe they're retreating from every system they once occupied. Thorn's jaw tightened. They will regroup. This won't be the end. The director's face sobered, perhaps. But the message has been sent, and it had. Loud and clear, the Qatar had come to erase humanity. Instead, they were the ones who'd been shattered. Now every species that watched from the sidelines had seen the price of underestimating Earth. Thorn leaned back in his chair, arms folded. The message isn't that we're dangerous, he said. It's that we're relentless. Someone comes for us again, they'll find out we don't die quietly. We fight, we bleed, we adapt, and we overcome. The Prime Director nodded. Then we'll make sure they remember. Later that evening, after most of the bridge crew had rotated out, Thorn stood alone in the observation bay, a narrow chamber at the top of the ship's superstructure. It was quiet there, no buzzing consoles, no flashing indicators, just a clear view of Earth. It floated peacefully in the dark, blue and green and clouds swirled, untouched by the fire that had burned light years away. Thorn looked down at it, one hand resting on the railing, the other loosely clutching a datapad. Behind him, Ryder entered. He didn't speak at first, just joined his admiral in the silence following his gaze. May you ever think it had come to this? Ryder asked finally. Thorn didn't look away, not like this. But I always knew, if they ever pushed us hard enough, he'd trade off. Ryder waited. We'd rise, Thorn finished. Maybe not the fastest, maybe not the most advanced, but we'd rise. It's who we are. He paused, eyes narrowing. I just hope the rest of the galaxy doesn't forget that now. Epilogue. A lesson worth remembering. In a quiet office back on Earth, months after the battle, a teacher stood in front of a classroom of young students. She tapped the screen behind her, pulling up a famous image, one now etched into history. The Vindication, battle-scarred, its hull smoking, floating over the debris field of the Qatar fleet. Every child in the room stared up at it wide-eyed. This, she said, is what happened when Earth stood alone. But how did they win? Weren't their aliens stronger? The teacher smiled gently. They were. But they didn't understand one thing. What's that? That humans don't quit. We may get knocked down. We may bleed. But when we believe in what we're fighting for, when it's about protecting each other, our families, our homes, we find something deep inside us that no enemy, no matter how powerful, can match. She paused, letting the thought settle. It's not just about war. It's about what you do when everything's on the line. Whether you fight or flee, whether you stand up for what matters. The room was quiet. Vindication taught the galaxy a lesson, she finished. But it also reminded us of something we should never forget. She turned back to the screen, voice quiet. That even when the odds are impossible, even when the night is darkest, if you hold the line, if you refuse to break, you can change everything.